I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. At a press event on Tuesday, President Biden spoke about inflation in America. The president spoke about how inflation was his, quote, top domestic priority. Biden once again claimed Putin's invasion of Ukraine is responsible for much of inflation. The president slammed plans from Republican Senator Rick Scott during his remarks as well. Biden then took questions from the press, where he was asked if he takes responsibility for inflation. Take a listen here.
Today you have retail gasoline prices and diesel prices at record highs.
Yes.
Yet you have yet to ask Americans to consume less. You're a train guy. Have you ever thought of your administration asking Americans to drive less, to take public transport?
Well, if you ever raised a family like mine, you don't have to tell them. They're doing everything in their power to figure out how not to have to show up at the gas pump. That's why, for example, one of the things that's going to help a lot, but it's going to take time, is our infrastructure bill. The truth is, they don't have that many options in terms of transportation around the country right now. If you live in the Northeast Corridor, you do. If you're driving back and forth between Baltimore, Washington, New York, et cetera. But you don't have many choices. You don't have a whole lot of choices to deal with other aspects of transportation in terms of local transportation. And so what happens is, and unless they're electric, we find ourselves the cost of flying, buying a ticket on a plane costs more because of gas prices. So this is a process. But it's a process that I've been consistent about, wanting to lower prices and shift to renewable energy so we're not as dependent. I have conversations almost every day. Well, that's an exaggeration. At least twice a week with one of my European counterparts, heads of state, on how can we help them, in fact, wean themselves off of Russian oil because they're so totally dependent. So we're working like the devil to help them transition, because as long as Russia's able to make money selling oil, they're going to continue to be able to do the bad things they're doing. So there's a lot. It's really complicated. I'm not suggesting American people can't understand it. They understand it, but they have, they're working 8-10 hours a day just to put food on the table. And so I think what's happened is we have, in a sense, I never expected, let me say this carefully. I never expected the Ultra-MAGA Republicans who seem to control the Republican Party now to have been able to control the Republican Party. I never anticipated that happening. Ukrainians. But what impact does that have? Do you think the average person, whether they have a PhD or they have any other job, sits and thinks, wow, there's thousands of tons of grain in elevators in Ukraine that can't get out. And Ukraine's one of the biggest producers of corn and wheat. I wonder whether that's the reason my prices are up.
Do you take any responsibility for the inflation in this country? Do you take any responsibility for your policies?
I think our policies help, not hurt. Think about what they say. The vast majority of the economists think that this is going to be a real tough problem to solve, but it's not because of spending. We've brought down the deficit. The bottom line is, how much does America owe? How much in the hole are we going? We're reducing that. Without congressional approval. Some parts are being held up by Congress. But all of my plan is focused on lowering costs for the average family in America, to give them just a little bit of breathing room. Now, what's the congressional Republican plan? They don't want to solve inflation by lowering your costs. They want to solve it by raising your taxes and lowering your income. I happen to think it's a good thing when American families have a little more money in their pockets at the end of the month. But the Republicans in Congress don't seem to think so. Their plan has actually made working families, it's going to make working families poorer. You don't have to take my word for it. It's in writing. They've made their intentions perfectly clear. Senator Rick Scott, Wisconsin, a member of the Senate Republican leadership, laid it all out in a plan. It's the Ultra-MAGA agenda. Their plan is to raise taxes on 75 million American families, over 95% of whom make less than $100,000 a year total income. The average tax increase would be about $1,500 per family. They've got it backwards, in my view. I proposed a minimum tax for billionaires. In recent years, the average billionaire has paid about 8% in federal taxes. Congressional Republicans have proposed increasing taxes on teachers and firefighters. 55% of the largest corporations paid net zero in federal taxes in 2020 on $40 million profits. It just isn't right. That's why I proposed a minimum tax for corporations. Their plan would also raise taxes on 82% of small business owners making less than $50,000 a year, but it would do nothing to help to hold big corporations and companies accountable. Think about it. Republicans in Congress are so deeply committed to protecting big corporations and CEOs that they would rather see taxes on working American families and try to depress their wages to take on inflation.